All right, Are You Cirrus? Kind of a special episode as we continue our hurricane week up and down the Grand Strand here this week, and I'm really excited about this podcast.
Yeah, this one's going to be fun. If this is your first time listening to us, you picked a great time. I'm meteorologist Andrew Dockery. That's Chief Meteorologist Jamie Arnold, and our special guest down in the low country.
Yeah, Chief Meteorologist Bill Walsh joining us from our sister station Live 5 down in Charleston. And of course, you can't talk about any hurricane history or any hurricane week anywhere in South Carolina without talking about Hurricane Hugo. And yeah, who better to talk to about the experiences with Hurricane Hugo than somebody who not only lived through it, but worked through it. Bill, thank you so much for popping in here with us.
Hey guys, how you doing, Andrew? Hello there, Jamie. How you guys doing?
We're doing fantastic. Let's talk about you, though. I forget all the nitty-gritty details, but you were a young buck in 1989, as we all were, and had just recently made a move to the beautiful Holy City, right?
That's right. In fact, I moved here in '86, and lo and behold, shortly after that, in September of '89, we had not had a lot of hurricanes in the last decade, really. I mean, Hugo was the first big major hurricane to come along to the United States in a long, long time. So, there I was, working, I was the chief meteorologist, and, my first chief job, and I was just, 24 or 5 years old, and here comes this big hurricane, and we had to work the hurricane. We actually had to evacuate the building and stay on the air at the same time, and it was just absolutely crazy.
So let's kind of back up. You're obviously the forecasting of hurricanes has certainly come a long way since 1989, but let's kind of walk through sort of step by step as sort of how that week unfolded. When did you first start to think, or when were there inclinations that, okay, this is a storm that we may potentially have to deal with?
Well, we started looking at it probably 5-6 days ahead of time. Now, the modeling wasn't as what it was today. In fact, the Hurricane Center forecast only went out 3 days at that time. So, what we were looking at was the hurricane that struck Puerto Rico. It was, I think, 105 miles an hour. It's a Cat 2 hurricane that struck Puerto Rico. And when it came off Puerto Rico, it was really it was still a very good structure. It was over warm water. And the synoptics were that there was a big ridge building across the northeast over the next week or so. And when we started to look at, the hurricane forecasting, the modeling, we had at the time the LFM model. I mean, things started to look at, hey, this thing is going to start to head toward, we thought maybe Central Florida. And anything that heads towards Central Florida for us, because of recurvature, we have to really pay attention to, because any kind of recurvature, any kind of turn to the north, certainly we're going to be in line for it in Charleston, in Myrtle Beach, along the Grand Strand. So once it moved off Puerto Rico and it started getting its act together again, we started looking at it pretty seriously, and some of the modeling kept taking it toward Central Florida, and then eventually Southeast Georgia. And about 3 days in advance, once the hurricane forecast started really kind of focusing on somewhere in Southeast Georgia or South Carolina, I mean, that's when we really started to say, hey, this thing is, it's not going to really go away. It's not going to go north. I mean, it had, you had a blocking ridge to the north. There's no place for this storm to go north. It had to come west. It really started to narrow down, okay, how close will the center come to us, and that's kind of where, we're going to be north and east of the center. We're going to be, we're going to be, south of the center. There's a lot of things coming to play, but it was a very, very busy week.
And I'm going to try to dig up some of the old graphics, especially the old forecast graphics, because the forecast cones that were issued in 1989 from the National Hurricane Center weren't like the ones that we're sort of used to today. They would put out a probability, right? And it was sort of a scattering of colors and triangles, and it was hard to read, and it had a huge scattering of sort of the probabilities of the hurricane passing within X miles of X location. And I remember some of the old ones, it was basically, Cape Hatteras to Savannah was kind of the target zone. How was it sort of getting that message across, especially at that time?
Yeah. That was, it's funny you mentioned that because those graphics we had to hand build. They weren't
yes.
automated as they are today, and they were probability graphics. And I'm gonna email. I'll text you or email you one because I've got the one from that day that we actually had, the one we used.
Wow.
And it was, I mean, when the probability started going up, we had to physically make that map, and so that was getting closer and closer to to the storm coming toward the coast, and of course it was continuing to be a pretty well developed storm, but those probabilities were really what we went off of, you guys. That was when you start to see those numbers come up, and it was, and you'll see, I'll send you the picture, it looked like a rainbow of colors. It was like a strike zone probability, and it started to come way up for southeast Georgia, South Carolina. So once we started seeing those numbers go up, then we had to start talking evacuation. We had to start talking storm surge. Obviously, we had no storm surge warnings at the time. We had the hurricane watches, the hurricane warnings, but we had no storm surge. We didn't have slosh models. It was, there was a lot that we were, kind of using basic science for, as far as like the storm surge potential and things like that. So it was, and then of course, as the storm got closer, and we started to have to talk about an evacuation and things like that, that's when things really started to get kind of crazy, especially for us because our TV station was right next to the ocean, right next to the marsh.
All right, so talk about sort of the prep process. I can't imagine having to think about. We've had a couple of close calls here in Myrtle Beach where we've kind of actually thought, okay, we may need to, find a backup home base somewhere. So as far as a TV standpoint, obviously you're going to try to stay on the air as long as you can. Go walk through that with the station and the city getting ready for this at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, what we had to do was, because where we were as a TV station, we had to start looking at whether we could actually stay there and broadcast, and it became clear that we couldn't. The storm was forecast to come right up toward our coast. We were looking at about a 20-foot storm surge in a lot of places. If you know Charleston, our TV station was right near the Ben Sawyer Bridge, which goes across to the Isle of Palms and Sullivan's Island. It's the island. It goes right to the Sullivan's Island side of it, and so we were right at a marsh on a good high tide, guys, and a good thunderstorm. It would flood the backyard of the TV station. So so we had to do a couple of these. We had to, of course, take care of the public, talk about evacuations. We had to get with the city and the county, Charleston County. Linda Lombard was the head of Charleston. She was the chair of Charleston County Council, and she was the face of the county, on TV, saying, evacuate, get out now. She kept saying, get out now, as the storm got closer and closer. And again, as we watched this thing get closer to us, we as a TV station had to decide where we were going to go because we couldn't clearly stay there. So we ended up evacuating to the EOC the morning the storm was approaching. It made landfall at midnight, but that morning they were moving records out. They actually moved a switcher out. They were moving boxes. I mean, we were literally moving the TV station in boxes and U-Haul trucks while we were on the air at the same time. So I mean, it was absolutely kind of crazy. So as the storm was approaching, it was a beautiful day, but the storm was increasing in power, and it was moving across the Gulf Stream, and it went from a Cat 2 to a Cat 4 from the morning of that the first 5 a.m. advisory. I think it was 105 miles an hour or something, and then when it made landfall, it was 135 mile an hour Category 4. So it was a very, very dangerous storm, but it was deepening. It was a rapidly intensifying storm over the Gulf. So as the storm was approaching, we were getting ready to bug out, and so we set up. What we did is we had a live feed from the Emergency Operations Center, and we had a live feed from the TV station. So what happened was we sent an anchor over to the EOC, and I was on the air at the TV station, and they decided they took control over there. And I got into a police car. They gave me a ride over to the EOC, and then we started doing all of our broadcasting from the EOC, and we just left the station on autopilot. There was nobody left in there. It was just on. And so we broadcast from the EOC until we got blown off. And a piece of the roof came off the building we're at, actually. But it was just a crazy, circumstances, because you had, we had to broadcast 24/7. We had, to take care of the people in the evacuation that was going on, forecast the storm, and also evacuate the TV station at the same time.
Bill, I have to ask, we always say that these cities and towns and buildings and what's left after each storm usually tell the story. I want to ask you, because I feel like we've heard all kinds of Hugo stories. What was going through your mind? Think of this. You're chief meteorologist, first job for chief meteorologist. You have this catastrophic storm. What were some thoughts as we're the day of, in the middle of it, even nighttime as Hugo is unleashing its wrath in the Carolinas? What are some things that you remember vividly, and maybe some thoughts and sights or sounds that you remember hearing as well?
Well, I remember vividly thinking to myself, you got to get this right. Just focus on this storm. I had a Today Show crew following me around. We were NBC back then. And the Today Show crew was following me the entire time. They showed up like 2 days in advance, and they were following me, everything I did. So I had that kind of over my shoulder. But personally, I kept saying, we got to just focus on the storm, focus on safety, focus on evacuation, and just keep giving information out. And that's really I was kind of really tunnel focused to make sure that we got it right, that we were staying on the air, that we gave the evacuation orders clearly, and that, this storm was continuing to intensify. And, the fact that the TV station was all by itself at that point, so we'll see how long it stays on the air. And then, as the storm approached that night, the scary part was it was in the middle of the night. It actually made landfall over the harbor at midnight, 21st, 22nd of September. And, just to have it right there, the eye was 19 nautical miles across. And we actually went out in the middle of the eye, and I looked up, and you could see the stars, your ears popped. Somebody said they heard an airplane. It might have been a Hurricane Hunter. I don't know, but I didn't hear that. I just remember we had like 15 minutes or so outside, and then we had to get back in for the second part of the storm. But it was, but I noticed the damage when we came out during the eye of the storm, and we were watching that. Now, as the storm came in, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, we were on the air, but then we ended up getting blown off, or the power went off of the TV station, and that was it. So, we were just there watching the storm, documenting it on the camera. But, I clearly remember a stop sign when I was looking, and I was doing this, and then boom, the stop sign was just ripped off the pole, and also a billboard came crashing down. It was, and the sound, it was such a different sound, guys. I always pictured a hurricane to be like, but it was more of a woo. It's what it sounded like. When you hear the wind going that fast, it's like woo. It's like a howling sound. And it was just amazing to see it go from where we were, was about 100, 105 miles an hour, to nothing when that eye wall came over, and then goes back almost immediately to the backside of the storm. So, there was a lot of, for me, it was the Super Bowl, right? For the weather guy, the young guy, the new chief, it was like the Super Bowl. But on the other hand, I had just bought a house, and we were getting married that following year, that following spring. So my future wife kept saying, I wonder if the venue is that we're going to have. I wonder if it's left. There's crazy things go through your mind. But I was out of my house, by the way, for 3 months. 3 months I was my house. It took to repair the house that I was living in, which was not far from the TV station in Mount Pleasant. So it got whacked pretty good.
Wow, that's incredible.
And I had to live with my in-laws.
Man,
my future in-laws,
and of course,
for 3 months. So.
You mentioned like the eye, obviously coming right over the beautiful city of Charleston, and of course, just north of that eye, just north of you, just south of McClellanville, there at Bulls Bay, was where Hugo's peak surge was, 20 feet, and I'm pretty sure that one still holds as the highest surge ever here on the East Coast, and basically right between us here in our own backyard. That's wild. Take us into the morning of September 22nd. By that point, little young Jamie is marveling as Hurricane Hugo is bringing 100-mile-per-hour gusts to Charlotte, but the sun's coming back out in Charleston. Walk us through that, sort of the day after, and what I'm sure was just a dazed and confused city.
It was very surreal, guys. It really was, because the storm went by fast. I think the motion was like 25 miles an hour. So the storm motion was pretty quick. So it was in It did a lot of damage, and it was out of here. And as you mentioned, it went up to Charlotte and blew, windows out of bank buildings up there. But the morning, and there's some crazy things, right? So the morning after, we came out, and there was a guy selling "I Survived Hurricane Hugo" T-shirts on the corner over on Dorchester Road with a T-shirts, selling T-shirts. I survived. I should have bought one. I survived Hurricane Hugo. That was literally like 7 or 8 o'clock that morning. Then I started looking around, and I see billboards down. I see amazing amounts of damage. There were a lot of rumors. Remember, we didn't have the internet, so the rumor control was tough because you had all these people saying, "Oh, the bridges collapsed," or "this happened," or "that happened." There were some rumors were true, some weren't. But I had to move a piece of a red light, the red lights, the red part of a red light had fallen right in front of my car. So I literally had to pick up this big piece of the red light, and I literally kept it. I still have it to this day. It's in my house. It is kind of a piece from Hugo, but it was the red part of the red light that I had to move to drive my car. But it was surreal to see the damage, guys. I mean, Charleston had about 11 feet of water. Mount Pleasant probably a little higher. Our TV station, get this, 6 feet of water, and the water line, you could see the water line. When you walked, you could smell it. The pluff mud was everywhere. We looked at that TV station, and it was completely destroyed. The set was picked up by water and just slammed across the wall. I mean, it was a mess. I mean, and you could smell it. It smelled like pluff mud. It smelled, and there was like that much pluff mud on the floor. And you look at that, and the damage that was done to that TV station. It was 6 feet of water. The water line was completely even. And then you drive around. I went to my house, and I saw that most of the siding was gone. I think the chimney was in Cleveland. I mean, the thing was kind of a mess, and the whole neighborhood was a mess. In fact, the funny thing was, not funny at the time, there was a CBS News crew on my street shooting for CBS Evening News, and because all the networks were there. Well, we were at the EOC. I mean, remember, there wasn't cable, or there was, but it wasn't like it was today. And every network was here, and they were just incredible coverage. I had the Today Show following me, in which Al Roker did a beautiful piece on. But I got to say, it was, the next day was surreal. And then my house, all the siding was gone. What they call it, the outside of the house had cracks in it, in the walls. So there was water running down the side on the inside of the house. So clearly, and there was mold starting to form already because of the humidity and stuff. So, and the roof was almost all the shingles were gone. So I had, at the time, $30,000 to $40,000 worth of damage. But, I don't know in today's world what that would be. But that was a lot. And it took 3 months to fix it. And like I said, I had to live with my in-laws. And that might have been worse than the storm itself. But don't tell my wife that. No, they were wonderful. And although I did not know, though, that you could recycle paper towels. My father-in-law would put the paper towels out, dry them out, and use them again. And I'm like, really? I had no idea. But so you learn things, right? But that's kind of what I remember the next day. It was crazy.
I love that you mentioned.
Oh, there was no communications. I mean, we had no phones.
Right. Yeah.
No power. We had no power for almost 2 weeks.
I love that you mentioned the water in this TV station that you evacuated. And at the beginning of this, you mentioned the Ben Sawyer Bridge. And the Ben Sawyer Bridge, the picture of the Ben Sawyer Bridge, is sort of one of the hallmark pictures of Hurricane Hugo. It's the one that ended up getting sort of upended to keep you from getting across the island there. It's amazing that you were so close to that.
And those people couldn't get off the island. And as you mentioned, that bridge is a swing bridge. It goes like this, but it was vertical, right? And it was literally standing on its side. So that was the only bridge. They did not have the Isle of Palms connector, if you know the Isle of Palms. And in fact, the funny part was, at the time, originally the Isle of Palms, I believe they voted down the idea of having another bridge over in the Isle of Palms versus just the Ben Sawyer Bridge. And shortly thereafter, it was unanimous, I think, that they voted a new bridge in. But at the time, we only had the Ben Sawyer Bridge for both Sullivan's Island and the Isle of Palms. So both of those islands had no way off at that point. So the Corps of Engineers came in, the Army Corps of Engineers, and they built one of those temporary combat bridges that you can that you set up that they use for emergency vehicles and stuff like that. And it took a long time to get that Ben Sawyer Bridge back in place. So they were cut off. That next day, I was invited by Bob Sheets, the Hurricane Center director at the time. Me, Rob, my friend Rob Fowler, and Charlie Hall at the time. We were invited to go on the Black Hawk helicopter with the director of the Hurricane Center, who flew in that morning because it was the first real major hurricane to strike the U.S. in years and years. So they wanted to see the damage up close and firsthand. So we got on this Black Hawk helicopter and we went out to the islands and landed. And we saw the damage firsthand. And when you're flying over those just lots. They were houses. They were just lots. Houses were just gone. It was just lot after lot after lot, and all of the trash of the trashed houses. We found. I mean, we went up to Hamlin Creek, and there were things in trees. There was a dishwasher on its side. One of my photographers opened the dishwasher, and the dishes were fine. But the dishwasher was probably moved from the ocean front all the way to the back of the island. None of them broke, but the dishwasher was there, so it says something about the dishwashers. But bottom line is, it was a big mess. It was a good year at least until things got sort of back to normal.
And Bill, what were the moments like after Hugo for the TV station? You led a community and the whole city through this as much as you could. You lose power, you're an EOC, you go there, your station's flooded. What were the months like after the fact when it came to telling the stories in the community?
I'll tell you what we had to do immediately. We couldn't work out of that building, and we couldn't stay at the EOC forever. So what we did was that next day, literally, we went up. Marco Linghi, one of our chief engineer and operations manager, we went up to the transmitter site, which is in Owendaw. It's the big 2,000-foot tower, and we actually broadcast out of the tower. So what happened was we had to go up there. We went up to the transmitter site, and there's nothing there but transmitters. It's not made to be on TV. So I sent my roommate at the time back to my house. I said, bring the logo. I had a logo, one of the older logos, on a big, like cardboard logo. I said, bring me the logo and bring me the kitchen table and as many chairs, the 3 or 4 chairs we have around the kitchen table. And that's what they brought. They brought that up to the transmitter site. My kitchen table was plopped down. We took the logo, plopped it on the wall behind us, put a camera down, and we plugged it right into the transmitter, and that was our set for at least a week or more, as they cleaned out enough of the studio back in Mount Pleasant to get us back on the air, back over there at the TV station. So literally, my kitchen table, a logo, and a camera was what we had, and we simulcast with the radio stations here because a lot of people had no power. So the only thing they could hear was the local radio stations, and that's what we did for the first week, a little more than a week. Then the TV station ended up just cleaning the studio first. I mean, they kind of just started from the most important part, which was the master control in the studio. They cleaned that out. They had to get all the pluff mud out. We had to build a temporary set, in which they did, and about a week and a half, 2 weeks after that, we moved back into the TV station, but the newsroom was in trailers. They brought in like those office trailers, put them in the parking lot, and the sales department was actually in they rented space in a strip mall down the street because they just weren't going to fix up the rest of the building that quickly. And then we had no weather equipment. I mean, literally, they called up and they said, call and get whatever you need, for weather equipment. So I called Cavoris at the time. It was Cavoris Weather Systems, and we bought I think it was a Triton 5 or whatever it was, Cavoris weather system, and we ended up going with that, and we had to order it. I was literally on the phone and said, send it to us. It was like, it was absolutely crazy. So, we had to rebuild from nothing.
I feel like, too, when it comes to these events, we talk about the you and Florence and Matthew, there's always something that you take away, like something you learned for the rest of your career. For you, Bill, what was that after Hugo? What was the thing that you carried with you for the rest of the time?
For forever and ever, I will always remember a couple of things. One of them is to to alert but not alarm, to stay steady in the storm. Charlie Hall, who was the big weather guy in Charleston for years, always said, alert but don't alarm people. So that was one takeaway for me on that one. Also, that we as meteorologists and broadcasters, we are also in the community. So the empathy with the viewers was really important. Going out and meeting people and talking to people after, helping people. That help. The neighbor helping neighbor stuff. That was really, really important after the storm, which I took away from that. And as far as future storms, really, it is just a matter of just focusing and understanding that these storms, and we've been through so many since then, and you mentioned Florence. I mean, it sat up there for you guys in Myrtle Beach and dropped rain on top of rain on top of rain. It was moving at 1 mile an hour or something. Yeah. I mean, that it is a long duration event, and you've got to pace yourself. And I think you learn to pace yourself and to focus, and it's hard on these long events.
Bill, obviously between Charleston and here in Myrtle Beach, the growth since 1989 has just been exponential. And even, you go back to some of our recent hurricanes, since Matthew, since Florence, even since then, we've had tremendous growth. And I love to tell the story of Hugo and hear the story of Hugo, and especially and also of Hazel, because they are examples of what we can deal with, of how bad it can get. Here on the coast of South Carolina. It's rare, but what is your message to all the folks that are coming here from Ohio and Kentucky and upstate New York and Indiana, and they went through Matthew,
yeah,
or they went through Ian 2 years ago? What is your message to them when it comes to, preparing, and when you hear us starting to talk about the big one, what is your message to those folks?
My message to everybody is always remember, no storm is like another. They'll always say, oh, this is going to be like that, or that's going to be like that. Every storm is different. They have different characteristics. They're going to attack the coast in a different angle. The worst part of the storm is going to be in a different place maybe than the last one, maybe like an Ian or a Matthew or even a Hugo. So every storm is different, and the storms don't stop at the coast. We always have to remember that. We remember that with Debbie last year. Tropical storm dropped almost 30 inches of rain across southeast South Carolina. And same thing with Florence up in Myrtle Beach along the Grand Strand. So those folks that are moving into the Grand Strand, moving into, southeast North Carolina, into, South Carolina coast, just remember these storms don't stop at the coast. You need to be prepared to move away from the coast and the beaches. You may not have to evacuate depending on the size of the storm, but you need to be ready with a plan. And I always tell people, just have that plan, because, even when we had Ian, we've had Matthew, we've had Dorian, we've had so many storms in the past, we haven't had a perpendicular strike to the coast like Hugo, though, since '89. We've had a couple of close calls, but a lot of these have been, coming up the coast, up toward Myrtle, up toward Little River, up toward, Cape Fear. So, just be ready that every storm is different, and another Hugo could certainly come along.
And all of the storms also, for the vast majority of them, except maybe for Isaias, were also weakening.
Yeah.
As they were making their turn. It's been a long time since we've had an intensifying hurricane approaching the coast at that perpendicular angle, which we always talk about as kind of the worst case scenario. Bill, I can't thank you enough. I know you're busy. We're busy. It's closing in on showtime here for us, but absolutely can't thank you enough. It's been amazing hearing your story of Hugo.
Yeah.
Oh, Jamie and Andrew, I'm glad to jump in anytime, and you guys do an amazing job up there along the Grand Strand, and you keep the Grand Strand always with the first alert, and we appreciate you guys at WMBF as partners, and let's hope we don't have to talk hurricanes, but we'll be ready for them for sure.
Yeah, let's definitely not talk about any more Hugos anytime soon. But again, Bill, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and your expertise and those fantastic stories on Hugo. Thank you so much.
You bet, guys. Take care.